It wasn't just another spy movie. It was the film that turned James Bond into a global phenomenon. Goldfinger 1964 defined the Bond formula. The gadgets, the villain's lair, the one-liners, and that unforgettable Aston Martin. But behind the smooth tuxedos and golden bars lies a production full of strange accidents, clashing egos, and stories so bizarre they sound like fiction. From shocking near misses to real-life gold scandals, this was a spy adventure both on and off the screen. Here are 20 of the weirdest facts about Goldfinger you never knew. The Golden Girl nearly suffocated. One of the most iconic images in cinema history is Shirley Eaton's character, Jill Masterson, lying dead on the bed, painted entirely in gold. But the effect wasn't just striking, it was dangerous. Urban legends circulated that Eaton nearly suffocated during the process because the paint blocked her pores, supposedly leading to skin asphyxiation. The truth? Eaton later clarified that she never faced such a fatal risk. Still, precautions had to be taken. Makeup artists left a small patch of skin unpainted near her spine so her body could breathe. During the shoot, medical staff monitored her closely, limiting the time she could remain covered in gold. Even so, the process was uncomfortable, with the metallic paint causing stiffness and chills under the hot studio lights. The myth of the paint death became so widespread that fans still debate it today. The image was powerful enough to inspire decades of homages, from music videos to advertising campaigns. In a film filled with unforgettable visuals, the Golden Girl stood above them all. But behind the glamour was the reality, a scene that could only be shot carefully, under controlled conditions, to prevent art from turning into tragedy. Sean Connery hated the golf scene. The golf match between James Bond and Auric Goldfinger is one of the film's most famous sequences, filled with tension and sly humor. But Sean Connery himself reportedly disliked filming it. The reason? He found golf boring and tedious. Ironic, given that his character made it look effortlessly stylish. At the time, Connery wasn't much of a golfer, and he grew frustrated with the long shooting schedule. Director Guy Hamilton, a passionate player, insisted on authenticity, making Connery repeat shots until they looked convincing. The Scottish actor grumbled between takes, eager to move on to action scenes. Ironically, Connery later developed a deep love for golf, eventually becoming an avid player for life. He even credited Goldfinger for sparking his interest, despite his initial dislike. For fans, the golf scene became a turning point in the Bond series, the moment where Bond's battles weren't just about guns and gadgets, but about style, wit, and psychological warfare. What Connery considered a chore turned into one of the most defining Bond moments ever filmed. In true 007 fashion, even A Gentleman's Game became deadly serious. And for Connery, the tedium of filming gave way to a lifelong passion off-screen. The Aston Martin almost didn't happen. When you think of James Bond, you think of the Aston Martin DB5. But here's the twist. Aston Martin initially refused to provide the car. The company didn't see the value in loaning a luxury vehicle to a film that might flop. Producers persisted, eventually convincing Aston Martin to supply the DB5, but only one car. That meant the crew had to modify it with gadgets, like revolving license plates, oil slick sprayers, and an ejector seat, while still keeping it drivable. When the DB5 became a sensation after the film's release, Aston Martin scrambled to build replicas for promotional tours, realizing they had underestimated Bond's impact. The car became so iconic that it boosted sales worldwide, cementing Aston Martin's reputation as the ultimate spy vehicle. Decades later, the DB5 would return in multiple Bond films, from GoldenEye to Skyfall, always greeted by applause from fans. The weirdest fact? Aston Martin nearly walked away from history. If not for persistence, Bond's car might have been a Cadillac or Jaguar. Instead, the DB5 became the most famous movie car of all time, proof that sometimes The right gamble creates legends. Gert Frobe didn't speak English. Gert Frobe, who played the villainous Auric Goldfinger, delivered one of cinema's most famous lines. "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die." But here's the catch. He didn't actually speak English fluently. His entire performance had to be dubbed. Frobe was a German actor, whose heavy accent made his dialogue nearly unintelligible in English. Producers were impressed with his physical presence and menace, but they knew his voice wouldn't work for international audiences. So, they hired British actor Michael Collins to dub every single line. What's remarkable is how seamless the dubbing was. Many viewers never realized they weren't hearing Frobe's real voice. His expressions and timing were so strong that the dubbed lines matched perfectly. Later, Frobe admitted he was embarrassed by the dubbing, though fans loved his portrayal regardless. Ironically, his German accent added to the authenticity of the role, making him all the more intimidating. Today, Goldfinger remains one of the most iconic Bond villains, and most people never knew that the voice wasn't his own. It was a strange collaboration, one man's body, another man's voice, and a villain that became immortal. The laser was real, sort of. One of the most famous Bond moments comes when Goldfinger straps 007 to a table and threatens to slice him in half with a giant laser beam. At the time, lasers were cutting-edge technology, mysterious and futuristic. But in 1964, they were also so rare that even scientists had only just begun experimenting with them. The prop department couldn't find a real laser to film with, so they improvised. The glowing beam scene in the movie was a special effect, created with clever lighting and practical tricks. For shots where sparks fly across the table, crew members used a concealed blowtorch under the surface to burn the gold sheet. The effect was convincing enough that audiences believed they were witnessing a genuine high-tech death trap. To heighten the tension, Sean Connery improvised one of Bond's most famous lines. When Goldfinger asks if he expects him to talk, Bond replies, "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die." The exchange wasn't in the original script, but became one of the most quoted lines in film history. The scene worked because it blended cutting-edge science with classic suspense. The laser may not have been real, but the fear in Bond's eyes, and the audience's gasps, certainly were. Honor Blackman's secret training. Honor Blackman, who played the unforgettable pilot Pussy Galore, was already a star in Britain thanks to her role in the Avengers TV series. What many fans don't know is that she entered Goldfinger with a very unusual advantage. She was trained in judo. Blackman had studied the martial art for her television work and brought those skills straight to Bond. This was groundbreaking at the time. Women in 1960s cinema were rarely portrayed as physically powerful. Blackman insisted on doing much of her own fight choreography, and Wyler adapted scenes to showcase her abilities. The result was a Bond girl, who wasn't just eye candy, she was formidable. On set, Connery reportedly enjoyed sparring with her during rehearsals, though he admitted she often caught him off guard with her precision. The chemistry between them owed much to that real-life playfulness. Her role became iconic, proving that Bond's female leads could be tough, clever, and essential to the story. Decades later, Blackman said she was proud that girls wrote to her, inspired by a woman who could stand up to 007. In a franchise full of glamorous characters, she stood apart as the one who could flip Bond to the floor. Sean Connery didn't like his co-star. Although Sean Connery had effortless chemistry on screen, behind the scenes he wasn't always fond of his fellow actors. In Goldfinger, rumors persisted that Connery didn't get along with Honor Blackman. Their personalities clashed. Connery was brash and direct, while Blackman was witty and outspoken. According to crew accounts, they often teased each other, sometimes to the point of irritation. Connery reportedly disliked the way Blackman drew attention during press tours, overshadowing him with her sharp remarks and martial arts demonstrations. For her part, Blackman found Connery's sense of humor a bit too rough at times. Despite this, their professional respect remained intact. Both delivered powerful performances, and audiences never sensed the tension. Their scenes together sizzled with energy, in part because both actors were strong-willed and refused to play second fiddle. In later years, Blackman spoke warmly of Connery, crediting him with professionalism, even if their personalities weren't always in sync. Ironically, the slight edge between them may have fueled the realism in their scenes. Bond films often thrive on friction, and here, some of that tension was genuine. The result? A dynamic pairing that audiences still remember 6 decades later. The Fort Knox set fooled the U.S. One of Goldfinger's most jaw-dropping sets was the inside of Fort Knox, where Goldfinger plans to contaminate America's gold supply. Here's the twist. The crew never got permission to see the real vault. The interior of Fort Knox was, and remains, one of America's most secure secrets. Production designer Ken Adam had to use his imagination. He created a dazzling gold-lined vault filled with stacked bullion bars, using plywood painted with metallic finishes. The result looked so convincing that when U.S. officials saw the film, they worried it had revealed classified information. The truth: Adam had invented everything from scratch. He later admitted he had no idea what the inside of Fort Knox looked like. His vision was pure fantasy, but it was so impressive that it fooled even government officials. Audiences were mesmerized. The glimmering gold vault became one of the most famous sets in film history, turning Adam into one of Hollywood's most respected designers. To this day, the Fort Knox of Goldfinger is the one most people picture, not the real thing. It's a weird case where a movie's imagination became more iconic than reality itself. A real stuntman flew the plane. In the film's explosive climax, Pussy Galore's pilots engage in aerial maneuvers as Bond battles Goldfinger. While many assumed miniatures or models were used, much of the flying was done by real stunt pilots performing dangerous tricks in the sky. The aerial team pulled off barrel rolls, tight dives, and low-altitude passes that looked thrilling on camera but were terrifying in reality. One stunt involved flying within a few feet of treetops, leaving no margin for error. According to reports, the pilots often improvised mid-air to achieve the dramatic shots director Guy Hamilton demanded. Sean Connery, who hated flying, refused to go anywhere near the stunt planes. He joked that Bond might be fearless, but Sean preferred to keep both feet on the ground. Honor Blackman, however, loved aviation and was thrilled to see female pilots represented in the movie. The sequence became one of the film's highlights, proving that Bond wasn't just about gadgets and cars. It was also about aerial spectacle. Those pilots remain unsung heroes of the production. Their risks gave audiences a genuine thrill that no special effects of the time could have matched. A swimming pool became Bond's prison. When Goldfinger traps Bond and threatens him with the laser, audiences believed they were seeing a cutting-edge vault room. In reality, that dramatic set was built over a swimming pool. Ken Adam designed the set at Pinewood Studios, but space was limited. To achieve the illusion of a vast, high-tech chamber, the crew constructed the set above the studio's large water tank. The empty pool gave them depth to work with, allowing the laser table to sit dramatically at the center. This unusual choice caused complications. The floor was unstable, and equipment had to be carefully balanced. Lights overheated the enclosed space, making it sweltering during long takes. Connery complained about the humidity, joking that Bond wasn't sweating from fear. He was sweating because the set felt like a sauna. Despite the challenges, the trick worked. On screen, the chamber looks immense, futuristic, and threatening, perfectly capturing Bond's most famous close call. Audiences never suspected that the ultimate death trap was actually sitting inside a converted swimming pool. It's a testament to how creative problem-solving turned limited resources into one of cinema's most iconic sets. Connery filmed surrounded by guards. During the shoot at Miami's Fontainebleau Hotel, Sean Connery was already so famous that producers feared he'd be mobbed by fans. To protect him, they hired a team of bodyguards to surround the actor whenever he walked through the lobby. The unusual sight of Connery, flanked by security, only fueled the frenzy. Hotel guests swarmed the set, hoping to catch a glimpse of Bond in action. Some even tried sneaking into restricted areas, forcing guards to hustle Connery through service corridors to reach the pool deck in time for his scenes. Connery reportedly disliked the attention. A private man, he preferred to slip away quietly between takes, but the mania surrounding Bond made that impossible. He joked that he felt more like a royal than an actor, always escorted and watched. The irony is that the Miami scenes were shot with minimal crew, partly because the location was already so chaotic. Yet those few minutes of screen time captured the sunny, glamorous image of Bond in America and showed how 007 had become an international obsession. Off-camera, Connery wasn't just playing Bond. He was living the strange reality of being the world's most recognized spy. Gold bars were actually painted lead. In Goldfinger, stacks of shimmering bullion fill Fort Knox, suggesting unimaginable wealth. But in reality, those gold bars weren't gold at all. They were painted lead bricks. The production team faced a practical problem. Using real gold was impossible. Even a small fraction of the bars shown on screen would have cost billions. Instead, carpenters cast thousands of blocks from cheaper materials, then sprayed them with metallic paint to create the illusion of fortune. Each bar weighed far less than real gold, but still enough to strain the actors lugging them around. Crew members joked that they were moving more fake treasure in a day than any pirate could dream of. The illusion was so convincing that audiences believed they were seeing Fort Knox's genuine riches. What's even stranger is that some of these prop bars later went missing. Collectors today occasionally unearth one of the painted bricks, treating it as a relic of Bond history. What was once scrap metal on a soundstage has become a valuable piece of movie memorabilia. So while Goldfinger's plot revolved around sabotaging America's gold supply, the movie itself was built on lead and paint, proof that Hollywood's riches are often pure illusion. The U.S. government took notice. The fantasy of raiding Fort Knox may have been pure fiction, but it got the attention of the U.S. government. When Goldfinger premiered, some officials reportedly worried that the movie revealed too much about the bullion depository. The concern was misplaced. Ken Adam, the production designer, had invented the interior entirely from imagination. Still, the film was so convincing that even members of Congress raised questions about how much access the filmmakers had. The truth, they never stepped inside Fort Knox at all. Instead, Adam relied on broad descriptions of the exterior and filled in the rest with Hollywood magic. Ironically, his vision was so grand, it became more iconic than reality. To this day, many people picture Goldfinger's vault when they think of Fort Knox. The strange result was a film blurring the line between fact and fiction. A set built from plywood and paint became a symbol of America's wealth and power, one so effective it briefly spooked officials. Goldfinger may have been a villain in the film, but in real life, he managed to fool even Washington. Oddjob's hat was deadly, almost. Harold Sakata's Oddjob became unforgettable, thanks to his lethal bowler hat, its steel rim sharp enough to decapitate statues. But filming with the iconic prop was trickier than audiences realized. The hat was fitted with a reinforced edge that could damage objects on impact. During rehearsals, Sakata practiced throwing it at breakaway props. Even so, the weight and spin made it unpredictable. Crew members joked nervously whenever he prepared to hurl it, ducking just in case. One accident happened while shooting the famous scene where Oddjob decapitates a marble statue. The prop hat ricocheted off unexpectedly and nearly struck a crew member. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but from then on, extra safety precautions were enforced. Sakata embraced the role completely. A former Olympic weightlifter, he brought physical menace to Oddjob. making the hat more than a gimmick. Combined with his silent, stoic presence, it became one of the most recognizable Bond weapons ever. Today, replicas of the hat are displayed in museums and exhibitions, reminders of a villain so unique that his weapon was almost as famous as Bond's gadgets. Odd Job's bowler may not have been truly deadly, but on set, it came close. Sean Connery filmed scenes in a prison. For some of the Goldfinger sequences, Pinewood Studios wasn't enough. The crew secured permission to film in a real decommissioned prison in England. The location offered a gritty, industrial backdrop, perfect for Goldfinger's operations. But filming inside a prison came with eerie challenges. Heavy doors clanged shut with unnerving echoes, and the damp, cold corridors made long shoots uncomfortable. Connery joked that Bond had finally ended up where his enemies always wanted him, behind bars. The unusual setting added authenticity. Instead of polished soundstage walls, audiences saw rough stone, barred windows, and iron staircases. These textures gave the film a grounded feel, balancing the more extravagant sets like the Fort Knox vault. For the crew, working in such a place was unforgettable. Some claimed they heard unsettling noises in empty wings, while others swore the prison felt haunted. Whether true or not, the atmosphere gave the sequences a chilling edge. It's one of those weird production choices that few notice today. Bond fans remember the gadgets and the glamour, but tucked in the middle of Goldfinger is a sequence shot in an actual prison, proof that sometimes the strangest locations make the most convincing backdrops. A near electrocution on set. During one scene where Bond is strapped to a metal table, sparks and glowing effects were created using practical equipment hidden beneath. But the rig malfunctioned during a test, sending a jolt of electricity through the setup. Crew members scrambled to shut it down, and Sean Connery was quickly pulled off the table. Though Connery wasn't seriously hurt, the scare left everyone shaken. From then on, extra safety checks were required before the laser sequence was filmed. Connery later joked that Bond wasn't acting terrified of the laser. He was terrified of the sparks. The incident highlighted how risky practical effects could be in the 1960s. There was no digital trickery to rely on. The team had to use real heat, light, and machinery. While it nearly caused disaster, it also made the danger on screen feel authentic. Audiences gasped at the suspense, unaware that behind the camera, the setup really had put 007 at risk. What looked like the ultimate Bond death trap came uncomfortably close to being just that. Shirley Bassey almost fainted. The theme song to Goldfinger is one of the most famous in the Bond series, sung with dramatic power by Shirley Bassey. But recording it nearly knocked her unconscious. Bassey, determined to hold the final Goldfinger note as long as possible, gave it everything she had. In doing so, she tightened her corset so much for breath control that she almost fainted in the studio. Musicians noticed her staggering as she finished, but she managed to stay upright until the take was complete. Producer George Martin and composer John Barry knew they had something extraordinary. That single recording, full of grit and energy, became the version used in the film. Bassey later laughed about the incident, saying she nearly passed out in the name of Bond. The song went on to top charts worldwide, setting the standard for Bond themes that followed. Its brassy, powerful style defined the series' musical identity for decades. But behind the glamour was the image of a singer giving so much to a single note that she almost collapsed. In its own way, that story is as dramatic as anything 007 faced on screen. Connery refused cold water. Sean Connery was famously tough on screen, but he had one personal rule during Goldfinger: no cold water. When filming poolside scenes in Miami, Connery reportedly refused to dive into the chilly hotel pool unless it was properly heated. The crew scrambled to accommodate him, rigging makeshift heaters and even delaying shoots until the water was tolerable. Some extras grumbled about waiting, but Connery stood firm. Bond may take risks, he supposedly quipped, but I don't swim in freezing water. The irony is that Connery performed far more dangerous tasks elsewhere in the film, from standing beneath sparks to dodging real explosions. Yet his aversion to cold water became a running joke among the crew. In the final cut, audiences never suspected the fuss. Bond looked perfectly relaxed poolside, embodying suave confidence. Behind the scenes, though, the star's comfort became as carefully managed as any gadget or stunt. It was a reminder that even action heroes have their quirks, and for Connery, avoiding a cold swim was non-negotiable. Goldfinger was briefly banned in Israel. When Goldfinger premiered internationally, it was an instant hit, except in Israel, where it was briefly banned. The reason was startling. Gert Frobe, who played Goldfinger, had once been a member of the Nazi Party during his youth in Germany. Although Frobe left the party before World War II ended and later spoke openly against it, the revelation caused outrage. Israeli authorities temporarily pulled the film from theaters, sparking headlines worldwide. The ban was lifted after a Jewish family publicly credited Frobe with hiding them from the Nazis during the war, saving their lives. Their testimony changed public perception, reframing him as someone who had made mistakes in youth but acted courageously when it mattered most. The incident added a strange layer of real-world drama to a fictional villain. For audiences, it was unsettling to see Bond's enemy linked to real history. Yet the controversy also cemented Goldfinger as more than just entertainment. It became part of a larger conversation about morality, redemption, and memory. Today the story is a forgotten footnote, but in 1964, it was one of the weirdest and most unexpected controversies to ever surround a Bond film. The film's success changed Bond forever. Before Goldfinger, James Bond was popular. After Goldfinger, he was a phenomenon. The movie earned over $120 million worldwide, making it the highest-grossing Bond film of its time and proving that the series wasn't just a fad, it was a global empire. The success transformed how Bond films were made. Bigger budgets, more elaborate gadgets, and globe-trotting adventures became the formula. Merchandising exploded, from toy Aston Martins with ejector seats to board games and clothing lines. Children who had never seen the film still wanted Bond products. For Sean Connery, the success was double-edged. He became one of the most famous men in the world, but the pressure and constant scrutiny wore him down. Connery later admitted that Goldfinger was the film that made him consider walking away from 007. Still, its influence cannot be overstated. Bond became shorthand for sophistication, adventure, and cinematic spectacle. Nearly every spy film since has borrowed from Goldfinger's playbook. The weirdest fact of all, a movie made on a relatively modest budget reshaped an entire genre, turning a character from pulp novels into a cultural icon. Goldfinger wasn't just another spy thriller. It was the blueprint that defined James Bond for generations. From near accidents on set to Shirley Bassey almost fainting in the recording booth, the stories behind the film are as strange and dramatic as anything on screen. But that's the magic of Bond: danger, glamour, and the unexpected. Which of these weird facts surprised you most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.